There are great games about fish and fishing and people who fish, and also games about Vikings and zombies and trading in the Mediterranean and fishing in outer space. But what about games built around religion? Can games about religion be great games too? Can they even be fun? I mean, not just passively fun, but really fun. Today we are thrilled to welcome the Reverend Alice Connor to discuss what makes for a great religion-themed board game. Plus, at the end of this show, we'll each be naming our top 3 favorite religious-themed board games. On this episode of Board Game Faith, the bi-weekly show exploring the intersection of religion, spirituality, and board games. Welcome, everybody, to Board Game Faith. My name is Daniel Hilty.
My name is Taylor Kevin.
And I'm Alice Connor.
Alice, welcome so much to Board Game Faith. We are really, really happy to have you here.
I'm delighted to be here.
And Taylor Kevin, is that how you want to go today, or are you going Kevin Taylor?
I'm not sure yet.
Okay, that's
still
fine.
Thinking about it.
You'll answer to either one.
Yes.
Oh.
Anything but late for dinner, as my dad used to
Oh,
say.
we won't call
gosh.
you late for dinner.
You and my dad.
Well, Alice, again, welcome. We're glad to have you here. Alice is a wonderful person who inhabits the space at the intersection between board games and religion, the thing that this podcast really loves to explore. We first became familiar with Alice through her writings for the Daily Worker Placement, a wonderful online board game website that includes all sorts of blogs and reviews, and really just were so grateful for Alice's reflections on what makes for good religious-themed board games, and we'll be getting into that in a little bit. But before then, Alice, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
I would love that. So for sure, I write for the dailyworkerplacement.com. But I also, everyone in the world has a podcast. I also have a podcast with my friend Taylor that you can find by searching for Daily Worker Placement. Our podcast is sort of a child of that, I guess. It's called Table Talk. And we talk about whatever the heck we feel like talking about. We just did one on house rules because lots of people have ways that they change their games to play them better, differently, or whatever. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's just a little plug. Sorry.
No, that's what
absolutely.
I am an Episcopal priest. I just this past weekend had my 19th ordination anniversary, which is kind of wild.
Congrats.
And I was also just last night. It was in an interview for a new position, and they were asking me some questions. And I said, honestly, what my brain is full of is songs that I teach, the love of Jesus, and board game rules. I have, and probably a lot of your listeners would feel the same when you're a giant nerd about board games. I just have hundreds and hundreds of games rules in my head. I could teach them at the drop of a hat. I don't know why my brain works that way, but I can remember it. Sometimes it's helpful to refresh myself, but for the most part, I just can do it. It's weird. So
the rules don't fade over time for you.
Mostly no. It does depend on the game and its complexity. There's certainly we did have we did have a post we did about that time I forgot a really important rule, which does happen. I'm not saying I have all of it, but it's pretty wild. Like I can teach a room full of 200 people, 70 different games. It's fine. Which is not, I'm not trying to like boast or anything. I'm just saying like, I'm trying to articulate who I am in the world. How I walk through the world.
Are you good? Can you remember phone numbers and other stuff like that?
I do remember numbers, but I couldn't tell you what they're for.
Right. But you remember the pattern. Do you think your brain is just, it can walk through the structure, or is it as the board comes out, you remember, like, how do you think the triggers work for
That's interesting.
Unlocking
I tend to be a visual thinker. And I would say, how do I want to say this? Like themes, as when I write sermons, my sort of, how do I want to say this? The theme of the sermon or like an image that I want to use in the sermon tends to come first, rather than the thing that I want to say about the Bible, which may seem kind of backwards, but it works.
Yeah.
So I think there's something to do with the components and similar that it reminds me what I'm doing, maybe.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know. And I've written some books about women in the Bible and about how to be a better human, which you can find at aliceconnor.com.
Wonderful.
And yeah, I have been obsessed with board games for a long time. Like a lot of people, I would say Settlers of Catan was probably my gateway game to the heavier hobby, but I haven't played that in a long time. I play a lot of other stuff now. Just brought back a pile of games from my job that were mine, but it's a very large pile of things that I've collected over the years.
And where do you skew more, on the Euro side or the Ameritrash side?
I'm not gonna lie, I do have some Ameritrash stuff, but I'm gonna say I think that's a false dichotomy. I don't think that everything can be. I certainly don't think everything can be separated into a binary like that.
That's fair.
I mean, of that binary, I probably lean more towards Euro stuff. But I tend to be more interested in things with strange mechanics, or I do like clacky bits in my game. Like if you the fancy clacky bits for Quacks of Quedlinburg that you put in the bag and it makes lovely noise
like
when
upgrades
from upgraded bits for Quacks. Yes, they're so good. So I do have a little slight obsession with clacky bits. But like I like things that have
and
stuff. Well, and the feel. Cool. I was gonna say it's not the mouth feel, it's the hand feel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is how you just feel things. I like games that have weird mechanics. And I like things that make me think hard. I like a bit of a brain burner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like difficult decisions, like you could do this and it's really good, but you could also do this and it's really good. I mean, that sort of thing where you're trying to weigh which is the better good to do. Yeah.
Yes,
perhaps.
Definitely that. But also, while I'm very bad at it, I really enjoy games like Glass Road, where it's partly the question of decision, but it's more. We were just saying this on our podcast, Table Talk. It's not even a balance. There are three primary elements in that game. How do they interact? How do I make them function? Even like not even function well, just how do I make them function and then function well. Glass Road, of course, an older Uwe Rosenberg game about town building, because that's what he does. No fish.
Yeah. No fish, but there is some town building, and
there's gruel and wood, of course. Anyway,
does flax make its way into there?
No,
that's another.
There's no flax.
Thing. Okay.
No, there's like silt and bricks.
I think flax is in the Feast for Odin.
Oh, it maybe I haven't played that yet. It's on my list.
I think there's flax in that. Isn't it like big wheat thing or something?
I think so.
So among the games,
I need more
that you
flax
enjoyed,
in my diet, probably.
We need more flax. Just
a high flax diet.
That's right.
Okay, wait, listen. Speaking of that, high flax diet. I do I do actually have a game that
I
I kickstarted called So You've Been Eaten, that's about mining for jewels in the digestive tract of a giant space monster.
I've seen that talked about, yeah.
Wow. It's very good, and it was designed by a guy who has, I want to say, either Crohn's or IBS or something like that, and so it was at least a little bit inspired by his experience of his own gut biome.
Awesome. Interesting.
So,
has it come out yet?
I've either yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a great 2-player game.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Huh. That's so. Among the games that you enjoy playing, some of them have religious themes and or are built around at least somewhat the theme of religion, and this seems to have been a topic that kind of piqued your curiosity because you've written about this, right? The series that I got to see on Daily Worker Placement was your theme, Playing at Religion, kind of these series of essays about games that are built around religion, and I wonder if it might be helpful just to kind of start the conversation by defining what we're talking about. I mean, what is a religiously themed game? What sort of games are we talking about this episode?
Well, my definition that I proposed is that a religious game is one whose theme is primarily, but not exclusively, exploring the practice, history, or theology of any religion or spiritual tradition. That may seem kind of obvious, but like I feel like I had conversations with people where they're like, "Oh, how about?" Oh gosh, now I can't think of what they suggested. I feel like there were some like Eric Lang games maybe that were suggested, and I was like, I'm not sure those are religious games. I feel like they have some vibes of religion. I mean, they're certainly made up religions much of the time. It would. I guess now I'm saying this out loud. I didn't say in that definition a quote real religion, but then that brings a whole level of judgment on things. Like, do we count Scientology as a real religion? Having been created by a sci-fi author to make money? Unclear.
Right.
Also,
or
are there any board
Cthulhu
games about
themed.
Scientology? Listeners,
right.
let us know. So essentially,
and you think it would work because you go up levels, right? It would work really well.
Okay, somebody get on that. Yeah, so I felt like it was important to say, like, because I had been looking at a bunch of different games, and some of them are definitely more historical, and some of them are, I mean, there are definitely games out there that are about theology. There are also ones that are skinned to be about theology, but aren't really. Like, I would say Nicaea from Hollenspiel, phenomenal game. Excellent game. Also, side note, Run, Don't Walk, Hollenspiel does amazing work. That particular one, you are... The players are attempting to essentially... You're attempting to be on the right side of history around the Council of Nicaea in 325. It's not really... I mean, the cards do have theology on them, and they do have historical figures from the era. The art is gorgeous. It's very cool. You can read about homoousis and homoiousis if you are so inclined. But the goal is not to have the actual historical, quote, right answer that the Council of Nicaea created. It's more of a pressure luck kind of betting game, because you want to have enough of the cards from the A side or the B side or whatever that at the end of the game you have bet correctly based on what other people have done, which then ends up with a really kind of fascinating theological setup. Like, what did you actually come up with as a group?
Right. What is that saying theologically? Yeah, I mean, if
what is that saying theologically? Yes. Right. You know, Dan Thoreau from the Space Biff podcast, he was on this podcast earlier. Yeah, and he also talked about Nicaea. Great game. And I've never played it, but it's not. I guess Amabel Holland is. I guess the design. Just she's amazing.
Shout out to her. But I've never played it, but he spoke so highly of it as well. I want to play it now. It sounds great, but it does bring up that really interesting question. You know, I mean, the impression I got from Dan is that maybe that's kind of the space that Amabel was trying to play with, was how much of our theology today is the result of the Holy Spirit coming and descending and working among the gathered community of believers, and how much of it is majority wins.
Majority rule, or like who bet on what and won.
Yeah.
And do they regret
power
it?
struggles.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Like I needed to be, for various reasons, on the right side of this, and so I chose this, and I don't like it.
Yeah. Practical.
The practical levels of that. Yeah.
Expediency. Kevin, you feel like are you look to me like you were trying to say something there a second ago. Any thoughts on this?
No, except that I want to play it, and it is. It sounds really cool, and I was just saying it the other day. You do need 3 people, so there is a tricky kind of
Okay. I don't think it works with 2. Well, there's 3 of us here. You should just drive to Cincinnati, and I have a copy.
There you go.
Let's do it.
That'll be so
Go
convenient.
for it. But you're saying that the game. Sorry, Daniel.
No, go ahead.
But Alice, you're saying you feel like Nicaea, the mechanics don't match. Is that what you're implying there? That the theme is there, but not the mechanics, because it's press your luck?
Well, no. So sorry. Thank you for that. What I meant, sort of, but and like a, it's not an auction, but you are kind of betting on things. Per what we were just talking about, I actually think those mechanics fit well with sort of, again, what I think Amabel might be trying to do with it. But that, I would say it is a religious game. I also like to categorize food, which, if any of my former students listen to this, sorry, I'm bringing it up again. I have a very expansive understanding of what makes something a sandwich. So listeners, please prepare to be horrified. I do think a burrito is a sandwich.
Nice.
Anyway, my point is,
I
say that to say, if you think about like the Target logo with the sort of bullseye situation, there's stuff in the middle that is very clearly a sandwich, right? I think there's games that are very clearly games about religion. And then there are other games that are maybe a little bit less so, still very much about religion, but kind of takes on some other aspects. And then eventually you get things way on the outside where it's like, it's got a skin of religion, but isn't really. And you're going to ask me what an example of that is. I don't have one off the top of my head.
Good. Well, one I thought of. What's that?
Go for it.
Go ahead, Kevin.
The Settlers of Catan got a Mormon.
Yes.
Right? It's called the Settlers of Zarahemla. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Yeah, Dan,
so that's one where it's really not a religious game beyond just the words.
Yeah. There's another one that's like a sort of Christian themed one. It's a similar kind of thing. It really is just Settlers of Catan with some religious stuff thrown at it, and it's like, is that?
So a couple things related to that. Number one, before I let it pass, my favorite quote of the episode so far is, I have a very expansive understanding of what makes for a sandwich. That's a fantastic quote, and I thank you for putting that just out into existence, Alice. I love that.
That's what I do.
And the second thing is, it makes me wonder, so if there are these mechanisms that don't necessarily seem to lend themselves to match with the religious thing, it makes me wonder, are there mechanisms that are especially well suited for a religious themed game? And what would they be? Well,
I guess it depends on how cynical you are.
Right. I think we're open to anything on this podcast.
Right, for sure. I mean, we were just talking about the idea of Scientology and sort of, right, like going up levels. You could totally see tech tracks. You could totally see, I really enjoy playing Tzolk'in. Tzolk'in the Mayan calendar. I would say that is a religious themed game, though it is also culturally appropriative, which is a whole perhaps other conversation.
Right.
It has a lot of things in it. It has, among other things, religious temples that you can kind of move up in terms of presumably your relationship with the gods. So I could see mechanisms like that. working.
Yeah.
But I love games with interesting mechanics. And as I was saying, I like games that are complex and make my brain hurt a little bit. But I also really like games that aren't necessarily super complicated, but give you a vibe. I love games about feelings.
Yes.
Now, and I'm going to give you an example of that is not religious, but I think is one of the most transformative games I have ever played. And I am hoping I'm going to be interviewing the designer. I've forgotten his last name, Cesar. The game is called I Guess This Is It. It's an 18, it's from Button Shy. It's an 18 card role-playing game for two people where their relationship is ending for whatever reason. Now, it's a role-playing game, so you set it up at the beginning. You choose together who you're going to be. Is one of you dying? Is one of you just moving away? Are you on a foreign planet and something happens? I don't know. It can be anything. It can literally be anything because it's a role-playing game. But it's card-based. And you have this little sort of setup of cards on the table, and you play a card, and you talk to the other person about the theme of that card, at how it relates to the relationship you've created. And essentially, when you run out of cards, the person who is leaving says, "I'm sorry, I have to go. Goodbye." And they get up and leave the room, possibly the building. It is really powerful. Like I've watched it played several times. I've played it multiple times. It is so heartbreaking. It really is. Wow. I even played it once with a close friend who was in fact leaving, and we decided to play ourselves. And wow, that was a lot. A lot of tears. That game is surprisingly cathartic. It's just a game, and I have so many games about feelings. And I realize this sounds like we're kind of off topic here, but like for me,
no.
How do I want to say this? There's games about religion, which, to transfer it to sort of board game speak, would seem to be about mechanics, right? It's like, who are the gods here? How do you worship them? What does it mean to be part of this religion, right? The three of us know that's not all religion is, right? It's not just the surface level stuff. But then there's that level of what is the actual connection? Like, why would we play a game about... I have no interest in playing Settlers of Canaan because I'd just rather just play Catan.
Yeah,
I don't need it to have a religious skin on it.
Right.
But I would love to play a game that's about the emotional and cultural devastation of the actual settling of Canaan by the Israelites that deals with how hard that is. Or, alternatively, of the Jews coming back from Babylon to Israel, or for that matter, being taken to Babylon. You know, like, not in other words, there's a level of let's use bits and play cards and burn our brains, and I'm so into that. And we'll get to that in a second, probably. But like, yes, absolutely. But there's also stuff that's about how am I being changed? How am I being transformed? Which is what religion is about.
Yeah. Independent of what the theme of
precisely
the surface theme may be on a game. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
That's and that's certainly just is such a great articulation of I think one of the underpinnings of what we try to explore in the show, though with very varying levels of success, but this idea that really kind of any experience of play and gathering around the table and sharing in a game has religious and spiritual implications.
Absolutely.
And yeah. Oh, that's great. I love it.
But I've never thought about how does this game change me? That's such a profound question.
Yeah. Well, how often does a game change you?
Yeah.
Like that?
Not often, but they can. They can.
No, they absolutely can. My eldest and I are playing Holding On. What is the subtitle of Holding On? The Life of Billy Kerr. Something Billy Kerr from Hub Games. Absolutely recommended. There's a couple problems with the rule book, but it's about helping a guy die well. It's a cooperative. If you think about like Pandemic or something like that, it's a co-op where you are needing to provide him hospice care and keep him alive for a while so that you can help him process his 4 biggest regrets. It is beautifully made and very difficult to succeed. He dies a lot. And the designer, I thought this fascinating. I was looking up a rules clarification, and the number of times people say things like, well, we're trying to keep him from dying. And he came on there and said, he's going to die.
Wow. Yeah.
That's how this game works. He will die. So what are you
Side note,
doing in
so
the
will
meantime?
Right.
Yes, precisely.
I mean, that itself, that's so good. That ultimately the point isn't to stave off death forever because it's not possible, but how do we die well? How do we approach it well? Yeah.
Wow. So according to my definition, that would not be a religious game.
Right.
But it kind of is.
Right.
Yeah. It's dealing with the theme that religion is interested in. Yeah. I see what you're going.
I did I had that one sentence definition, but I also set up a handful of other benchmarks to suggest what makes it a good game, or what makes it a good religious game.
What are some of those benchmarks? What makes for a good religious game?
Well, conveniently, you emailed them all to me as a reminder, so thank you for that. Am I looking at my email right now?
I just put them together.
Yes, I am. Yeah. I know. I would have had to go find them. I mean, I think the first one that I mentioned in my first article is that it's a good religious game if it succeeds at what it's trying to do. This is something that my theater professor back in the day said when we were writing reviews, was don't worry about whether you like it or not yet. What is the thing you're consuming? What is it trying to do? And is it succeeding? Is it doing it well? So, I posted one about a Bible trivia game, and like, it was clearly trying to be an evangelism tool, and it did not do it well. It was just bad. It was just a bad game. Among other things, it had inaccurate information, but also just not good. And it's not, people don't get converted by that kind of thing. Like if that's your goal, that doesn't work. That's not it. So that made it flat out just a bad game, straight up. But something like something like A Game for Good Christians, which is basically apples to apples but with the Bible, is delightful. Which is one of my later ones. Is it joyous? But what is it trying to do? I think it's trying to do some increase in Bible knowledge, but it's also trying to be goofy and kind of not exactly throw shade, because it's clearly loves the Bible, right? It's trying to be an enjoyable, easy to pick up game about kind of the ridiculous stuff that's in our scripture, and it works.
Right.
It does it.
Right.
I think another benchmark is that if it's a good game, it explores whatever its theme is complexly and appropriately for the weight. So I wrote an article about the game Holy from Floodgate, which is a gorgeous game, so pretty. And I interviewed a friend about that one because there's some possible cultural appropriation elements there, which happens a lot with religious games that are designed by white people. But it's not a super heavy game. It's really an abstract in a lot of ways. And so it while it does sort of take a skin from Hinduism, that is the color festival of throwing color on people, it explores that, I think, in a way that is appropriate for the weight of the game, right? If it had been trying to be a whole lot more complicated, it wouldn't have worked. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I said it needs to be joyous. I mean, for a game to be good, you got to want to play it, right?
Right.
Like, what is fun is a whole other question, but is it fun? Yeah. Did you enjoy doing it? Like, that's the thing. And the last one I suggested as an option is that specifically for religious games, is it maybe like as a bonus point, I guess, does the game exhort the players to a higher good, or does it bring them some comfort somehow? Mm-hmm. Because in a lot of ways,
either one of those.
Yeah, I would think so.
Thing. Yeah.
Either or both. Yeah. And so that actually kind of begs a question I would love to ask you guys. I don't know if you're prepared for that, but
go for it.
Have you played a game, whether or not it was like on the surface a religious game? Have you played a game before that did bring you comfort or that exhorted you to a higher good?
I got a couple. I could jump in. Are you okay, Kevin, if I jump in?
No, go for it, because I'm mulling.
I mean, the comfort one is not and neither of these examples are religious themed. I have to admit, I've not played a lot of explicitly religious themed games. It was hard for me to come up with a list at the end, but I've got a few.
We avoid them, don't we?
we do.
Yeah.
But the the first one is kind of a cop out, but it's that I hate to say it, but I hate to say it, it's just not a good answer. One of the reasons I play board games is I find the process itself comforting. I find that process comforting, even if it's a solo game. At the end of the day, I think we were talking about that. I forget whether it's before on air or after air, but after we went online. But the tactile nature of it, there's something very grounding about playing a board game, right? Just where I'm dealing with physical stuff. I'm not looking at my screen anymore, and I'm existing in this real physical world, and I'm moving things around this board, and I
incarnational.
Mm-hmm. Look at you. That's so good.
And I would add, I think there's a sense of healthy control, maybe. That in the real world, there's all these things I can't control. But for this brief time, all I need to worry about is, trying to beat my last score and rolling these dice. Mm-hmm. So it's a little catharsis of a sense of control and randomness, but it's more limited than, trying to go to the grocery store and you have gum on your shoe, et cetera.
It's not randomness that's going to destroy.
Yeah, and the randomness at the end of the day is just a game, and you get to put it in a box and put it away. Yeah. So it's like the play is ended, or the rom-com ended, and you're done. Mm-hmm. There's a sense of closure to it versus our lives just keep going. So there's kind of an ongoing,
they do,
sense of control.
The other.
Sorry, you inspired. You got me thinking.
No, that's good.
Because it is a great question. How is the process of playing a game comforting?
Mm-hmm. The one. The other thing that came to mind, thinking about exhorting to a higher good, it's a mechanism I've mentioned before on this podcast, on the show. I don't know if this mechanism originated with Jamie Stegmaier, but I've seen it in a couple of his games in the Between Two Cities and Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig. But it's this idea, where your score is the lowest score that you build with your neighbor to your right or your left, and I have been fascinated by that mechanism because what it means, the practical implications of that is I'm not going to win unless I try my darndest to help my neighbor win, and I love that. I just think that I love that mechanism. Like I'm not going to fulfill whatever I'm working toward unless I'm helping my neighbor try to fulfill what they're working toward as well. And I just think that's a cool mechanism.
It's a good mechanism.
Yeah. Kevin, I jumped in there. Did you have some more thoughts on games that have comforted you or exhorted you?
I'm trying to think of something. During pandemic, one of my kids and I really got into Gloomhaven. And so it was more of a distraction, but it was really nice to be able to, when we were all hunkered down thinking we were going to die at some point, die a terrible death. And some people did, sadly, but trying to stay safe and not knowing what to do, like playing Gloomhaven a lot. I mean, we played the whole campaign in like 3 months. We were just punching our clock. So I guess that, in the sense of it, gave me a distraction and something that was fun to do with somebody else. So that I'll always remember that. Pandemic Season 1, I think is one that I would list, because it's the kind of game where at some point you're going to remember these are real cities. And these are real places. Like as cities start dying, I don't know. For me, you have a sense of global threat and wanting to save the world. And you're doing it together. And that was just really neat.
Yeah.
And there aren't very many games that have that reminder of this is kind of real in a weird way.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Alice?
Well, I adore the game A Gentle Rain. Kevin Wilson, I think, is the designer. It is out of print. I see the rumor on Board Game Geek that it is being reprinted by a new publisher at some point this year, which is wild and amazing news. It's this tiny, tiny little box game. The first rule is take a deep breath and relax. And the theme of it is that it's a co-op, it's a co-op tile laying game that whoever's around the table, and you can play it solo. You lay these little tiles with half flowers on them of a pond. You have gone to this pond, this lake, with your friends to see some special flowers bloom. And just the basic mechanic is you place the tiles and when like sort of domino style, matching the sides. And when you have got 4 together, the corners of the tiles are rounded off, concave rounded off, so that when you put the tiles together, there's a hole. When they're all matched, you put a little wooden flower that matches one of those in the hole. And your goal is to try to get all those wooden flowers on the board. It's very straightforward, simple, but deceptively so. It's actually quite hard. But it is so meditative. And I have introduced that game to so many people, and then had to say, I'm so sorry you can't get it. It's not available, which is a bummer. It is very much a comfort game. It is one that we played after our student died in our campus ministry. It is one that people would come in and play 3 or 4 rounds of, just having had a hard day. It's quick. It's beautiful. It's soothing. It's just a wild game, and it's not religious at all. Like, not even close. It's just flowers in a pond. And like at the end, it says, if you succeeded in getting all the flowers in, congratulations, you saw them all bloom. And if you didn't, you can always come back to the lake. This is so beautiful. And it brings me such calm and such delight. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. And I mean, I have a handful of things like that.
That's a great one.
Yeah.
I have a friend who adores that game as well, and as you say, it's out of print. Knowing her love for it, I have been trying to find it too and can't. But I've just heard such wonderful things about A Gentle Rain. Yeah.
Yes, it's well, when it gets reprinted, run, don't walk. It's amazing.
Cool.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I'm gonna buy like 10 copies.
So it seems.
I should have bought multiple ones when it came out.
Storehouse. It seems like part of what we're suggesting is things that help us be authentically human are religious, which is true. I mean, religion does touch on the human condition, and religion hopefully is making us more human, that God, and from a Christian point of view, Jesus, God, the Trinity, makes us more fully human.
Yeah.
So games that help us think through that are going to have at least an indirect connection to religion.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the problem is that so many, so the idea of are religious games good was brought to me by David Weiss, who's the managing editor of Daily Worker Placement, because we had been sort of brainstorming, like, I want to write about this. It's an interesting topic, but like, what is the question? And that was sort of his question, is because, so often I think all of us can look at games that have a religious theme and go, really? Like, why? Honestly, mostly, why are Christians like this? Why do we have to put Jesus into everything? Like, can we not just play a game about saying goodbye and have that be transformative? Why does it have to have Jesus in it? Well, just FYI, I guess this is it. Does not have Jesus in it, unless I guess you play it that way. Like, why do we feel the need to, like, I feel that way about so much Christian media. Like, Christian movies are always, they're so sanitized. They're either a bunch of white people in brown face wearing robes in the desert, or or they're just so like, there's no swearing and everything turns out well in the end. And like, everybody's just so nice and it's gross. That's not how the world is. I want movies that like, listen, Everything Everywhere All at Once is not a religious movie, but holy cow, I cried so much watching that movie. It's a movie about a mother and a daughter working on their relationship and tearing the world apart. It's gorgeous.
Yep.
And it has meant more to me than almost any movie that has had Jesus in it. And it's like we have to handle it with kid gloves or something. And I don't get. So my point being that David asked me that. David's Jewish, and he was like, "Are there any good ones?" Basically, like, what makes them good? Which hence those benchmarks that I was trying to come up with. You asked in your email about Ierusalem, Anno Domini. I haven't played it. It's got a lot of buzz, I think, because people like the designer, maybe. It's like I can't speak to that. I did read the Space Biff article about it, and I thought it was really funny that perhaps intentionally part of the theme is how close can you get to Jesus at the Last Supper, which is literally the opposite of some of the stuff that he said.
Right.
So I kind of enjoy that as a sarcasm kind of moment, but also like, it's, I've forgotten his name all of a sudden, Space Biff. Dan
Thoreau. Dan Thoreau.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the things he brought up was like, how serious is the designer about that? Right? Like, is that meant to be kind of sarcastic? Is it meant to be in that Annabelle Holland space of like, you see how these mechanics are a little weird. You get it, right? You get how this is complicated. Is that what the designer's going for with that? Right. Or are they just saying like, oh, this is a cool mechanic and like, yeah, of course you want to jostle to get close to Jesus and taking it very seriously. Mm-hmm. And that changes how the game works.
It
both
does.
mechanically
so
and also as you feel about it. Yeah, go ahead.
This is so interesting because it gets into different ways media can be interpreted and how the interpretation can differ potentially from where the person who wrote it, how it takes on a life of its own. Because I read a bit of her design journal, the person that designed it, and she's Spanish and Catholic, and she's really into sort of that Catholic tradition of mystical, spiritual idea of sitting at the foot of Jesus. So I think, and I haven't played it yet, but I think what she was trying to do was that idea of like, who's the famous Spanish nun? Teresa.
Avila?
Avila. I think it's Avila.
Teresa of Avila.
Teresa of Avila. That meditatively you want to sit at the foot of Jesus and be close to Jesus. So she was, and this is me reading between the lines, but trying to turn that into a game was what can I do to get to be as close to Jesus as possible. So that's my guess, but the criticism that Dan is launching is perfectly valid, that has a very strange notion compared to Jesus' message of being a servant. Right. Versus being, but yeah, Mary and Martha, Mary sat at the foot of Jesus. So I think that's what she was after, but you have to pay money to get there, or fish or whatever it was. Evidently,
you have to bring a better potluck dish.
Correct. Yeah, I saw it in the store, and I almost got it. It's not too expensive as these board games go, so I came really close. I think they look very strange on the cover too. They look very menacing.
They do.
The art is odd to me, but that's one that. I think it's her first game as well.
Yeah.
A couple things on that. One, it reminds me of something that you said, Alice, in your writings, which is that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this sense that you kind of feel the game is especially good to the degree that it's not trying to convince us of something, but to the degree that it is trying to explore a space, right? And that's kind of a little bit of what I hear in your all's discussion of this game, right? That to the extent that it is inviting the player to explore a space and thinking about Jesus, and that, that's a positive thing to the extent that any game is trying to say, well, this is the argument that you have to believe because of my game. That's maybe makes for a less good game. Though, as you wrote, there are some exceptions to that you thought of as well.
What were my exceptions that I wrote about?
Well, you said, like, for example, no, it's all good. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to spring it on you. You talk about the Underground Railroad and Train.
Yeah, okay.
Both the games are trying to convince us of something,
that's right.
but rightly so. Rightly
so.
Of the
so, and again,
that
maybe that comes back to that question of what is the game trying to do?
Right.
Right. It answers that first. Yeah. I guess I think that comes from my perspective on so much of Christianity specifically. And that's definitely the space I sit in. And so listeners, if you come from other traditions, I would actually be really interested to hear if this shows up in your tradition as well. That sort of this idea, Christians in particular are real big on making more Christians, or maybe I should say some Christians are really big on making more Christians, and sort of by hook or by crook, and that feels in the real world, like outside of games, that feels gross. I worked on a college campus for 14 years, and that's a huge mission field for a lot of folk. They come out to college campuses to try to convince students in all kinds of different ways that what they're doing is wrong and they should become Christian. And to the point that I even thought at one point about taking the cross off the front of our building, because it has so much negative and manipulative weight that was not what Jesus was doing. But I chose not to do that because I wanted the cross and the pride flag next to each other as a symbol. But also I didn't want it to be a bait and switch, because that happens all the time. We were a Christian organization, and while we looked a lot different than a lot of other ones, and we were entirely radically welcoming to people who were not did not try to make anybody into anything else, it was important to note that this is a thing. This is where we come from, right? So I think I have a lot of resistance to certainly people who do that, but any game that seems to be trying to manipulate me in a religious way.
Coerce you.
Or coerce me in a religious way. Now, I know the end of Train, so I can't play it now, but also there's like one copy, but whatever. I love the idea of the existence of Train, that it does what it does, right? And it is trying to manipulate you into something. Yeah. Interestingly, that's its entire point. So so there's that exception, right? It's trying to make you see something about the Holocaust that you might not have thought of. And I think that's important work too. So I guess I'm kind of talking myself on two sides of this, right?
No.
Maybe the religious themed ones are too. What's the word I want? Surface. They're very obvious.
Yeah,
when they do that.
They're reductive instead of expansive. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's actually a very good distinction. I want all my games to be expansive. I mean, even something as simple as A Gentle Rain.
That is good.
It's concise, but it is expansive in the sense of what it offers you.
There's a new religiously themed game coming out, I think maybe end of this year, Ezra and Nehemiah from Garfield Games. And you're mentioning, what's it like to rebuild. I don't know how much the religious theme is overtly present.
Right.
But you do have, and I love their games, so I think they will, I'm sure it'll be a Euro type building experience, and that fits in well with the sense of rebuilding a city that was destroyed and temple.
Yeah. It's funny. I saw that, I posted on BGG or something about that, and I was like, really? Ezra and Nehemiah, the two most boring books of the Bible. They build a wall. That's what they do. Build a wall.
Right.
It's great.
That's why they're safe, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would be intrigued by that as well. Like, I'd love to play it and just see how it goes. I did write an article about Jericho, which is a card game from, a while ago, like 2012 or something. I can't remember exactly when it came out. I got it very cheap when I was getting some other games from somebody in a trade. And I was like, sure, I'll get a $5 card game about the fall of Jericho. Why not? It's very good, it turns out.
Yeah,
it's definitely a brain burner, and there's some luck involved, and yeah, you're everybody's trying to build their own sort of color-coded walls of Jericho and knock everybody else's walls down and get points while you do it, and it's wild. It's a wild game about wall building, like straight up about wall building and falling down.
I remember reading that article from you, and I was like, I mean, everything you write is just a delight to read. But yeah, I was surprised by the turn that it took, because I was starting to read. I was like, oh, she's not going to like this game. It's like, oh, she really likes this game.
It's great.
This is great. This is great. Yeah. Well, that's a good segue into, we wanted to end the episode by talking about our maybe our top 3 favorite religiously themed games. And do we feel ready to do that, Alice and Kevin?
Sure. I'm gonna have to make it up because I don't remember. I don't know.
Or we can go to you last, Alice, if that would be
helpful.
helpful.
Me last. Yeah, that's probably a good choice.
If that would be. And Kevin, you were the one that thought of this. Do you want to kick it off? Do you have any thoughts?
Are we doing all 3? Or are we doing what? You want me to give all 3?
Oh, do you want to go around
one
in a
at a
circle, like a countdown to the top one?
Goodness.
Oh my goodness.
Okay.
I don't know if I ranked them.
Yeah, I didn't rank mine either. I say, how about just you just want to go with your top 3?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'll do number 3, and I'm going to go with the Freedom, the Underground Railroad, and because it's a story about history, and I do own it. I've only played it maybe twice. I don't know that it's that great a game mechanically, but it's really neat what it's doing, and it reminds you the role of religion as well as both the characters and people. Some of them have religious backgrounds, but that idea of liberation. But I also appreciate that there are difficult moral choices in it, that in order to save a group of people, you may have to let one of the slaves get captured. So there's a bit of that. So I appreciate the tough moral choices and the sense that the slaves just keep coming in and they're right. And so you've got this continual flood of slaves, and what you really want to do is abolish slavery, but for now you can't. So all you do is save as many as you can. Yeah, I would go with that. What about you, Daniel?
Oh man, mine is not nearly as good as yours. That's thinky and deep and good. I really struggle to come up with games of religious themes. I just haven't played that many. I think, as you were saying earlier, Alice, I tend to avoid them, if I'm being honest. But
when you clock out, Daniel, you're ready to play a game. You're clocked out of the religion world.
That's right. So this was so these are all stretches, but I kind of went with a broad interpretation of your definition, Alice. Just kind of that it deals in some way with religious practice. That's kind of what I applied to all 3 of these. And so I guess the first one I said was Red Cathedral, which is because you're building a church. You're building St. Basil's Cathedral in Moscow, and yeah, so your architect's trying to build different parts of a church in Red Cathedral, it's a very, the ratio to thinkiness and strategy and tactics to box size is quite impressive in this game. It's a very small game in the box, but it has a big footprint both on your table and in terms of the kind of strategy space and thinking space. And you're trying to build a church, so yeah, I like it. That's okay. My number 3.
I love it. I am literally scrolling through the religious themed games on Board Game Geek right now.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine.
So I think what I'm going to do is, I'm not sure that these are going to be top 3 favorites, but I think these are 3 that I find interesting. How about that?
Sure, that's great.
And worthy of exploration.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm gonna start with so not necessarily in order. Sorry, ruining your prompt. I'm gonna start with Acts of the Evangelists. Which I just had on the screen. I think it's on the previous screen here. Acts of the Evangelist is a card game. You are going around the ancient Near East and the Mediterranean and collecting cards to build the Bible, basically. You are collecting the stories of course, I can't find it right now. That's fine. You're collecting the stories of eyewitnesses, of like the evangelists, the apostles, and it is a set collection game, basically, sort of tableau building set collection game, and you're building codices. So once you put things in your codex, it's hard to move them. So then you can take whole pages and put them somewhere else. But like, in what order do you put these stories, and how to? I find it really fascinating theologically, like how did the groups who wrote the Gospels really, how did they do their editing? And that's a whole realm of theological study is textual criticism and redaction criticism and all that. So it's really good. It's a good game. It's a very good game. Unfortunately, my copy, all the cards are sleeved. Thank you, friend Bailey. I am unsleeving them. I hate sleeved cards. It's nothing to do with the game. Just cannot stand that. Anyway, next.
I understand. That's a fascinating one.
I have a problem with sleep. Well, they don't stack well. You have a stack and then they kind of fall over. I don't get it. You
can't do the shuffle. You can't do the riffle shuffle.
And the edges are sharp. So sometimes I feel like I'm getting blood drawn. Like,
Yes. Agreed.
Awesome.
Kevin, do you have a number 2?
Number two. I am going to go, I'm not sure which one to put here. I'm going to go with Sleeping Gods.
Oh,
because, there's these different, so I would say it's a religiously themed game, but it's kind of in a world of spirits, animism, paganism, which is totally fine. It's cool. It's different. So this is a world where there are these forces and beings, and I think the designer is Mormon, and it reminds me of Mormon science fiction, and if you've read any... what's his name? Brandon Sanderson. It's that type of world building with various spirits. And I'm not sure how that connects with Mormon culture or religion. Anyway, but I thoroughly enjoy it. So it's not really a Christian world, but it is a religious world. Yeah, so Sleeping Gods.
Nice.
Knowing of your love for Sleeping Gods, Kevin, which I've never been able to play, I backed Sleeping Gods 2 on Kickstarter. I'm looking forward to getting that.
Wow.
To give it a try. Or
Sleeping Gods 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Whatever crowdfunding source website. I'm looking forward to the Electric Boogaloo expansion. It would be...
it's going to be good.
That'd be great.
It comes right after the shuffle. Oh. That was... I didn't even mean to do that was awful on many levels. Okay. So my number 2, again... I struggle with this. I really just went with religious practices of some sort, and Biblios. Biblios is a game of monks collecting scrolls.
Just
it's a simple card game. Again, kind of like Red Cathedral. It's a very small box, but allows for a big open space in terms of strategy and tactics, and it's really good. It's a fun, thinky, quick card game, Biblios, where you are different, maybe, I don't know, monasteries, different schools of monastics who are trying to collect the best scrolls so that you can like totally, flex on the other monasteries, because that's the way of Jesus.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's my number 2. What's another one from you, Alice?
I'm going to say Nuns on the Run. It's an older game.
Nice.
It's a hidden movement game. The little nun novices are trying to secretly run out onto this massive board and find a key and then go somewhere else to get their secret treasure and then get back to their room without being caught by the Mother Superior. It's hilarious. I love a hidden movement game. I mean, it could be anything else, but I think it's really charming. The little nuns running around, trying not to get caught by the religious authority. That seems right.
That's a great theme.
It's good. It's one of those like all against one kind of games, like Not Alone or something like that.
I've heard great things about that game. I haven't tried it, but I would love to.
It's
someday.
older.
Yeah.
Here it's on Amazon, $40. It has a fun looking cover.
Nuns on the Run. Cool. That's great.
It's on the run.
Interestingly enough, also has a sequel, The Electric Boogaloo. No,
Right, it really does.
Wild.
Yes.
It's weird.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
What a coincidence.
Excellent.
All right, Kevin, what's the number one for you?
Number one, I'm going to go with Frostpunk, the board game, because it is just surrounded with difficult moral choices. Like, you really don't want the kids to get sick, but somebody's got to get sick, and for the town to survive. So you're just confronted with painful, like, what's the worst outcome? And the least worst outcome might be, all sorts of problems, or it's just it's not religious in any way. Well, there is a way there is a religion that can come in, this new religious order that can come in and try to sort of give people hope. But other than that, it's more of just the difficult apocalyptic choices.
Yeah.
And I still haven't won, so yeah.
What's that?
I still haven't beat it. It's like I can't even beat the introductory one. It's so hard.
Yeah, it's interesting how moral, ethical choices have factored into this conversation about what makes for a good religion, whether the theme is explicitly religious. And it occurs to me throughout this hour, sorry, and then I'll get to my number one, of talking that how we define a religious game largely depends on how we define what's religious, right? I mean, is what's religious something that specifically relates to the outward, practices of an inherited tradition, or is what's religious interacting with what is this life all about in kind of, and the divine in whatever space we're inhabiting, kind of.
As you say that, I'm reminded of part of this conversation I had last night. I talked about one of my tattoos. It says mercy, not sacrifice, which I believe is from Joel, though it could be from Hosea. I have to re-look that up because I can't remember. But mercy, not sacrifice being essentially a theme of most of the prophets. God's desire, not that we shouldn't sacrifice ourselves for each other. In context, it's a particular religious practice, and not. I mean, it was written by Jews. It's not anti-Semitic. It's not anti-Semitic. It's this idea that all the prophets continuously are saying, your festivals mean nothing when you are not caring for each other. That's the sacrifice part, right? I want mercy. How are you living with each other? Religion, like the practice, the cultic, which Christians have cultic stuff as well. The trappings are lovely, but they are nothing if you're not caring for each other well. Mercy, not sacrifice.
Well said. I love it.
Wasn't me.
Thank you. well recapitulated in the
recapitulated indeed.
Yeah.
So what's your number one, Daniel?
Thank you. My number one is, here we go. My number one religiously themed game is, again, just dealing with some religious practice of some sort. Heaven and Ale. Heaven and Ale is a game about monks making beer.
Yeah, love it.
And apparently
it's a long tradition.
Apparently that's a long religious tradition of monks in monasteries making ale and beer. I love the game Heaven and Ale. It's a great game that combines some of my favorite mechanisms. First of all, I'm always a fool for tile placement games. I love tile placement games. It's a good tile placement game. But it also has the mechanism where you can go as far as you want to around the track, but then everyone gets to catch up with you. And so, you can make this big move, but then it allows others to have other moves. My other favorite mechanism is you're really not exactly sure who won until you get to the end, because there's like this super complicated mathematical formula that you have to apply at the end of the game.
Oh, you like that?
I do.
I don't like that at all.
Yeah, right. You don't like, Kevin and I have kind of talked about this before. Like, Kevin especially likes kind of like more luck-based games because anybody can kind of win at the end, right? Based on you get a good roll or whatever, and this kind of simulates the same thing, but in kind of a Euro game. You apply this mechanism at the end of the game, and the math is so obtuse that you're not exactly sure who's the winner until you do all your algorithms, and then you figure out who the winner is. And I love that. So Heaven and Ale would be my number one.
In the rule book, does it prohibit drinking ale playing the game, because you wouldn't be able to do the math?
Could make it worse.
That's true. Unless you just ask Google to do it for you. But yeah, that's right. So, how about you, Alice?
So my last one I'm going to say is Zen Tile Solo, which is also hard to get. It's very expensive from Japan. I backed it on Kickstarter. It's a tiny, tiny little box. They have a Zen Tiles Basic, which I think is more of a group game. Zen Tile Solo is meant as a solo game. It's got sort of a day, like a little strip of wood that is your last 24 hours, and then a bunch of little tiles with feelings, experiences on them. And so it's a meditative tool. It's not really a game. It's on Board Game Geek though. I have some. It's a whole other conversation, but I have some issues with what they consider as a game and what they consider as not a game. Alice is Missing is apparently not a game because you can't win it, but you can't win Zen Tile Solo, and it's on anyway. Whatever. Fine. Anyway, Zen Tile Solo, you sit and you contemplate the last 24 hours, and you take these tiles in your hands and you draw them out randomly and you put them where you experience them. It's like surprise or grief or whatever. And you can do it however you want to. You can put them as close as you want to the timeline to signify like it was really strong or it was maybe kind of distant. You can use the top as sort of experiencing these things in a positive way, and underneath as experiencing them in a negative way. I mean, you do whatever you want to with it. And it kind of acts as like an emotional journal for your day. There's like, I think 20 tiles. And then it also comes with a really pretty stone. And this is along the lines of Gentle Rain and other feelings-based games that I enjoy. When you are done, the rules say, basically, you just did a really good job. Like, you deserve something nice, like this beautiful stone. And so you take this beautiful stone, you hold it in your hand, and then it invites you to put it on the pattern that you've made, on a place when you felt particularly, I can't remember the word that they use, but particularly good about how you showed up in that moment.
Wow.
I know.
That sounds amazing. I want that game.
It's so delightful. It's like you'd have to spend like $70 to get it from Japan because the game itself isn't that expensive, but shipping is stupid for such a tiny box. So if you ever see it anywhere, totally recommended. It's a little tiny black box, Zen Tile Solo. Love it.
That sounds amazing. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Have you heard about Kevin?
Well,
no, it sounds like something in a therapist's office.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'm actually sitting here wondering where my copy is.
Zentiles.net. Mm-hmm. Oh, and they're cool little stones.
Yeah, all the stones are unique too. So.
Wow. That's awesome. I have to explore that.
You're welcome.
Jeez, that's a good one. Masterful.
I have a whole list of games I can recommend to everybody for all the things. It's great.
I love it.
Well, how can people find you, Alice?
How can people find me? Probably just aliceconnor.com. That's my writing website. I think, or you can find me on Instagram. That's my primary social media is Pastor Alice. And I do post about games on my Instagram, but not nearly as. I mean, the Daily Worker Placement's a good place. I mean, for my stuff, but also for David and Taylor and Bailey and all the others. We have a nice stable of folks who do some interesting stuff. So dailyworkerplacement.com.
And Table Talk is your podcast.
Table Talk is the podcast. You can't find it by searching Table Talk, though. Unfortunately, we're in the process of trying to fix that because it's on the Daily Worker Placements podcast feed. So look up Daily Worker Placement, and then you'll find me and Taylor. 9 whole podcasts.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Awesome. Wonderful. Yeah. Well, and Alice, thank you so much for being with us.
You're so welcome.
It was a delight to get to have you on the show. And yeah, we really encourage our listeners to check out Alice's wonderful reflections and content in the various spaces that they occupy in the world of books and podcasts and blogs. And we're very grateful and honored to have you on the show today. And yeah, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It was lovely.
All right. And Kevin, thank you. And you're awesome too, man. And thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in or watching us on YouTube. We're grateful for all of you.
That's right. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.